uh, online that you have mentioned during your trip in Bangkok. So we want to learn and we want to get some point that we can use to create our theme online. And what's the point that different from the tele theme uh, our team need to learn. Okay.
Go ahead and share the presentation slide and start.
Thank you, True. That sounds great. Okay. This is Jessica. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So today, Emma, True, and I are going to share a little bit with you about our integration of virtual modality into simulation and to our operations. And then we'll open it up to see if other members of our team have additional thoughts. So True, next slide. This is some of our simulation leadership who you have met when you are in Portland, and we just wanted to share with you that we have done a lot of work on the online efforts, and we will continue to share that with you moving forward. Next slide. As you know, we are part of a larger team, and many of our trainings have taken place across the state of Oregon. And with that, we've needed to look at different online platforms and modalities to be able to deliver the healthcare training that is needed for all of our different participants throughout the Oregon Health and Science University enterprise. You have met some of them, I think, when you were in town, and you will meet others, hopefully in the future. So I wanted to start off, similar to our meeting right now, which is on WebEx. We also have used WebEx as our platform for a lot of our online training. For example, we do team huddles. These used to be in person, and now they're online, and they will remain that way. We have planning meetings with our faculty and our clinical content experts prior to events so that we can plan ahead. Those also happen using our WebEx platform. You will hear a little bit more from Emma shortly about some of the dry runs that we facilitate for our high fidelity mannequin-based training, our hybrid events that include also standardized patients, and then our SP events that take place. These happen with faculty, with our SPs, with trainers, and with simulation operations. Some of the statewide events that we have also been doing, and Thailand, you have a very big country, so I know that you already do quite a bit of online training as well. We can learn from you. We recently did a training that was Portland-based and partnering with La Grande, which is east of Portland, and we did an SP and faculty feedback training. Emma will be able to share more about that later as well. We do virtual hybrid trainings with CAS trainers and using the technology to connect our learners across the state. This was most recently done with our MUDA GTA, which is basically the Sensitive Exam Teaching Associate Program. Also, our School of Nursing has been using something called virtual simulation, or VSIM, and this is put out by Laerdal. We have no connection, no disclosures there. It's an additional online training that's really looking at clinical reasoning and training for more of the undergraduate nursing program. However, I know some of the graduate practicing teams have also looked at this. Next slide. Some of our goals with our online program are to be prepared for our learners and participants when they're going to be coming to an event, or if the event is online. Clearly, using an online platform can be beneficial because it helps people to not need to be driving, parking, getting through traffic. Maybe traffic is a little worse in Bangkok, but we still do have traffic situations in Portland. And so we do that and as being good stewards of our time and resources. Next slide. Some considerations with virtual methods. For online to be successful, we had to make sure that faculty, staff, and learners, participants, had access to the needed technology and internet. This can be more challenging in some of our rural areas in the state of Oregon, and therefore some trainings are pre-recorded videos so that individuals can view them online and reflect on them. So that may be important also on a local level. Next slide. And back one. Additional operational tools. Sakai is a platform that's a learning management system, and this is used for course delivery for many programs. Lots of our synchronous and asynchronous learning programs and prep happen through this platform online. This, depending on the BDMS system, there is likely a learning management system that you would be able to access and utilize as well. We're happy to share more examples of specifics at a future session. And as we talk about this today, also please take notes. If there's a piece of this that you want a deeper dive on, let us know, and we will make sure to bring that additional information to our future sessions. For our online communication within our teams and for a lot of other work that we do collaboratively across the state, we're using Microsoft Teams. This can be used for chat. We have the OneDrive for sharing folders and files. And this is just another platform it's a platform utilized to organize information. We also utilize SharePoint and Bridge, which is another online platform utilized for organizing scheduling aspects needed for some of our online delivery. And with these tools, again, finding out what you have access to through your VDMS system, and you may already have those in place, is something to think about with your IT group. Alternate learning activities. We've really been looking at leveraging our audio-video systems for participants to view videos remotely and reflect on their practice. These types of alternate learning activities in place of an in-person training are really driven by curriculum, policy, and with protected information in mind. We have Dr. Gold on the call. He can talk all about that part of it a little bit later as well in terms of the EHR training perhaps and some of the online aspects. Next slide. So I will now be passing the baton to True, who will be sharing a little bit more about repeating, again, some of an exemplar that we have done within our standardized patient program and training. Some of these came out of lessons learned through COVID, and many of them are staying with our program because we have found them to be very effective for online course delivery. So passing the baton to my colleague, True Chatelain.
Thank you, Jessica. I apologize for my laggy change of slides. Something's going on with my mouse. Nonetheless, Hello, everybody. It's really great to see everyone. As many of you have met our teams, if not online, in person, and this is just a real quick look at the on-the-ground working team every day who's in SIM with the Standardized Patient Program. So it's basically consists of myself, a SimOps person, a scheduler, and 4 trainers. One is a relief trainer, and actually we've added another relief trainer. So the pivot to telehealth obviously was a very quick pivot for us. It was sort of like a very hard right turn. When we were shut down for the pandemic, we did not have a telemedicine platform in place other than 2 cases that we used to run for family medicine clerkship. And it was a very clunky system. We needed a telephone and we needed all sorts of other hardware in order to make this happen, along with a WOW. So we were in no way, shape, or form ready to pivot to hold exams for 165 learners, or for that matter, 50. So myself, Jessica, leadership, SimOps, we were very busy attending WebEx meetings, WebEx presentations about what people around the country, around the world were doing to move into a virtual platform. Not necessarily telemedicine, but moving their in-person operations to a virtual platform so that learners could have the experiences that they needed. It took us about 35 to 40 days to come up with a plan, which really at the end of the day was fast. We had School of Medicine pleading with us, please, how can you help us? 165 learners. We were just like, we don't have an answer yet. So we were really dividing and conquering online, trying to figure out how can we move forward and hold these very, very much needed exams for our learners and for our stakeholders. We came up with, here's our model. We had the family nurse practitioners, FNP, with the School of Nursing was the right size program that we could move forward with in a pilot to test the hardware, to test the software, to figure out if it was even possible to do and what it took. So with 33 learners in mind, we set up 4 rooms. 4 rooms. So in each room, we had an SP, that was the patient. We also had the need for an additional person, and that's called a room host. In virtual operations, the patient really needs to stay in the patient's personality and their affect. We needed someone that could help learners as well as the SP navigate any technological issues or whatever came up, so that the patient stayed the patient, the learner stayed the learner, and the host navigated whatever needed to happen. If it was a clue card that needed to be put up for the learner to have, the host did that as well. If there was timing so that the learner knew how much time they had left, the host did that. So there was an absolute separate person that was almost running the SimOps in that particular room, in addition to our SimOps person, because our SimOps person, Corey, was making many links to send to all of the learners and faculty so that they could show up in these 4 rooms. And these 4 rooms right here, each room takes somewhere between 4 and 6 WebEx links to set up. So it was a whole new process for us. At the pilot, we discovered many things. One is that we could do bigger and better if we had more room on the tech end in order to do so. So we continued to look for more answers. And in the meantime, we changed different programs that were accepted by OHSU. We came to a new platform called WebEx. And WebEx allowed us to expand in a number of ways. The difference, too, having hosts in room, excuse me, it was also really beneficial because what happened having SP hosts in room is it became a training session for that host. So it's sort of the train the trainer model. So if we had folks that were technologically challenged, they could sit in the room and observe, but they could be the host. Or if they weren't ready for the case or they were the extra, they would be the host. But it also gave all of the team an extra look at tools that they could use, being able to watch other SPs go through their interactions, particularly in their feedback sessions. So we moved forward from our 4 rooms, and we kept going with the intent to have at least 10 to be able to accommodate something like the School of Medicine learners with 160 rooms. We also did smaller programs at first to get our feet wet and to make sure we could perform. So we started doing surgery OSCEs, 24 learners over 3 dates. We finally did reach 10 simultaneously encounters. We did actually, and we are able to see 165 learners, not like we used to from 1 to 6. We see them over a day and a half. Nonetheless, this brought a huge critical need for these folks. We had learners that hadn't been with a patient or spoken to a patient in 9 months, and they were new learners. So we were really grappling with how to help folks. At the end of the day, our telehealth operations expanded not only to a virtual platform, we also expanded it to telehealth cases. We sort of came upon an issue, if you will, when we first began doing virtual sessions because faculty wanted learners to practice as though they were going in room. So learners would knock on the door and SPs would say, come in. And we were sort of running this virtual OSCE pretending that we were in room. And it's not a great or sustainable example. We finally were able to move folks to a telemedicine platform, to telemedicine cases, to telemedicine checklist, to telemedicine best practices. Because at the end of the day, we are moving to telemedicine, but also to be more true to the platform and how we were working, to not put an extra layer on the learner of pretending that you're in person when we're working virtually. So at the end of the day, we did amazing things. We held OSCEs for FM clerkship. We held CSAs. We held GTA and MUDA. We held sensitive exam teaching associates task trainer sessions. What happened was, it was in July. We have new residents coming in end of June. And generally, we will do a refresher for family medicine residents as well as internal medicine residents based on the pelvic exam and language that's used in that exam as well as best practices. Faculty reached out to us and how can we do this? So our GTA trainer got to it and we literally she literally had a laptop. She had a pelvic task trainer on a Mayo stand. She had her camera there. It was projected across the hall via WebEx in a huge lecture hall, and it was projected on the screen there. So her teaching was on the screen across the hall. Faculty were rounding the learners and the task trainers as they practiced as Alyssa gave the training. This was huge, and it was very different, and it was very unusual. However, although the learners did not get to practice a pelvic exam with a speculum, they found the refresh on the language and the verbiage that's used in the exam most helpful. Many had commented that they did not feel at all prepared before they had met with us, and it felt a lot better by the end of that virtual task trainer session. So it wasn't really limited to the physicality of what we could do. we did everything online, and we just figured out how to, best as we could, virtually show that example. To date, we now have hybrid offerings. It's created more of a demand, if you will. We will now be doing maybe a telemedicine case for clerkship in the morning and an in-person event in the afternoon. So we have half of a team that's working in the morning. Some of our team has to shut down, run across town, get to the get to the sim center, and be ready for the afternoon. And we have other trainers that are also going off-site. So we literally have hybridized our operations to the fullest, in that we can now hold somewhere between 3 events in a day, virtually, in person, and somebody else maybe with another program that's doing physical exams or ultrasounds in person. The current best practices that we incorporated into our operations moving to the virtual platform, in general, everything changed in the way that we trained SPs. In the past, in person, SPs would come to work an hour before sim. 45 minutes, we would read through the case, we would answer questions, we would exit, and we would go into sim. There were a lot of questions sometimes for folks that maybe weren't fully clear and weren't fully answered, although they went in room. We have found that SPs very much appreciate the virtual platform and the dry run that we now conduct, because everybody is 100% sure at the end of that training. The dry run consists of not only a technology check, we also get to meet as a team. So at the dry run, we have our SimOps person. We have all of our trainers that are going to be on that case, all of the SPs that will be working that case, myself, and faculty. That is the faculty lead. The dry runs are generally almost 3 to 3.5 hours. The first hour is the only time that we need faculty to be there. So it's not that huge of an ask when you hear 3.5 hours. The first hour is spent with faculty, answering questions, reading through the case, and then after we've read through the case, answers questions, everyone turns off their camera, faculty becomes the learner, and SP becomes the patient for that case, and we run an exemplar. And that exemplar gives the entire SP team what it is that our faculty is really looking for in terms of what the learners are maybe asking or wanting to know, or where those threads might be able to go. After the exemplar, we all come back and we have a discussion and we debrief and we figure out, did that go well? What did I forget? Let's change the timing. So the dry run is really a place and time where we can make changes. We can make changes to the script, we can make changes to the timing, and everybody's on the same page. However, at the end of that dry run, we have all agreed that that is what we're doing the day of that exam. There are no changes past that dry run. So after the dry run, all of those changes within the script and so forth are sent to the SPs and the faculty so that we're all on the same page. Fast forward a week later, within 2 days to 7 days is when we do the actual simulation. And at that time, everybody's on the same page because everybody was at the dry run. If folks weren't at the dry run for whatever reason, we do videotape them. We can share them with the SP that hasn't been able to attend the virtual dry run, and they're able to prepare for that case. I mentioned the host role, which has saved many a simulation, to say the very least. We might need an extra. The host can jump into the extra. We literally have had problems where the host left the room, moved to a completely different room, took the place of an SP whose technology shut down, and answered the question that the learner asked. So it has given us a lot more flexibility to work in this virtual state, in that we have a back channel where we can talk. We don't have to run down the hallway like we used to do, looking for someone, looking in the room. Where are they? No, we have Teams. Teams is a savior. Teams is a place where the SPs can go. We have a special channel for the SPs. They have an OSCE channel. They can ask questions. We can give them answers, and we can tag team it in the middle of a simulation when people are having questions. Did I answer this correctly? A learner asked me this question. I didn't know the answer. So everybody's gathering new information on the back end as the simulation's happening. We, the trainer team, and SimOps and myself are also navigating whatever problems are going on the back end that nobody really needs to know about. Faculty doesn't know about the problems. SPs may know about the problems, but really we take all of that stress out of the equation and we work it on the back end. So we very much depend on MS Teams. We always have what is called an SP Extra when we do any case, whether it be in person or virtually, and that person, as you may know, may have to jump in at any moment and also is prepared to. They have gone to the training, they have studied the case, they are observing, and they may be asked to participate, so they must be ready. And now I'm going to turn it over to Emma.
Thank you. We talk about limitations of the telehealth modality.
Emma?
Yeah.
Maybe just because we've been talking for a while, I just want to make sure to take a quick stop and make sure that none of our colleagues from BDMS have any questions about
Perfect.
all that great information that True just went over before we make a transition, if that's okay.
That's lovely.
Yes.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. At that time, when you cannot have the class, we call the on-site class. What is the difference between the online meeting and training, and we want to know how to train the simulation in the part of the skill by the online.
Do you want to take that?
Rephrase. I'm not entirely sure what the question is. What's the difference between teaching an online or structure?
Right, the knowledge and the skill. This is can teach by online both knowledge and skill.
Yes. So I can speak just a little bit, but I'd love to hear from other folks who are clinical. One of the things we've come up against is at the national discourse in the US when we were moving into COVID, and what can we do online versus what can't we do online. So theory is great, preclinical is great. Getting, medical students or new folks to learn about the physical exam was really limited, and trying to figure out those pieces. And that translates into what type of learning objectives you can do with a telehealth sim. So communication-based learning objectives are great. A head-to-toe physical exam would not work. So telehealth sim, where we have the option to, it wasn't all because of COVID and we were away, but we have the option, what cases and resources are we using online and which ones are we using in person? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, because in our class, mostly we use the simulation to fix the problem in the team working. But
Yes.
everyone need to sit in front of the computer or the monitor.
Yes.
Yeah, they can move. They cannot move. So maybe the online cannot answer every modality of the simulation purpose, right?
It cannot, and there are limitations to the modality, certainly, as we, there's actually, this is what the slide is about. But I think that there is more team training that you can do than you think, in terms of getting on the same page, in terms of forming and norming your team like rules and ground rules and expectations and forming a culture kind of like similar thought, you can do that. But obviously clinical work is very physical and spatial, and so there are limitations to what you can do. You couldn't orient, all your orientation for a new nurse could not just be online, but you could do a portion of it online.
Okay, and I think Lawan, she asked that how many maximum person in the online classes that you have been done.
Specifically for virtual sim, we can do, so just by WebEx's nature, there's 25 possible people on one screen. And then if you have more than that, you have to go to multiple screens. So as a facilitator, I don't like more than 25 if we're having an interactive classroom, because I can't see everybody. So if I'm training standardized patients or orienting students or learners, that's my goal. But again, that's very specific to WebEx. If you decide that your institution, is mostly using Zoom or something else, those numbers may change. And also, if you have 4 facilitators and 100 people, then you could do that. But an asynchronous presentation in that sense.
I think one of the other things is too, Emma, that Dr. Pazan, is when we went virtual with COVID, we had to. It didn't mean it was the right thing to do. So one is always remember, and when you have the option, your goal is to find the best way to get the education for the least amount of time spent and resources. So having to do 2 virtual sessions as opposed to 1 in person may not be as good of a use of time. The other thing that we've seen, or that I've seen, is because it is easier to capture more people at once virtually, remember to keep your ratios the same, and you may even need to get them more narrow when you do things virtually, because communication is more choppy, because people don't interact as quickly virtually as they do in person, and it's harder to bring out ideas. You may even want smaller sessions, even though the temptation with virtual is that because you could have a room as big as you want, technically, that you actually bring in more people. So I think we have to be much more diligent going forward as a profession as to what are the best practices now that it is no longer a necessity, but an option. And I don't know if we've really fully established that. For example, what Ashley was talking about, I do all my simulation work is with electronic health records. And you would think that would be perfect for virtual. And it's absolutely terrible. And it was terrible because the learners need to have 2 monitors. And most don't. And we actually did side-by-side comparison. So we moved everything to in person. So as Ashley was saying, for example, WebEx has 25 people on a screen.
Who's Ashley?
But making sure that, for example, what kind of screen are your learners using? Are your learners doing this on a phone or a tablet that may not be able to show all 25? So again, impacting. So you really need to go do a good inventory about what technology your learners are going to have available to them in order to make sure that it matches what your facilitators expect.
I think Alicia had some things to share.
Yeah, I do. Thanks,
Okay.
Jeff. I think, Jeff, thank you for mentioning a couple of things. From my perspective, from the hospital side, we have done a lot of virtual events. We've had to, and we've still maintained our in-person sim events. And I think Emma and both Jeff have made some highlighted points. The thing, I'll go back to a couple things. One is what we've learned from being forced to do it, and then really answering the question about what makes sense virtually. given the variation in technology of our employees, there's a lot of variation in technology, which you would be surprised by. So we have some events that are more than 30 people, and we limit the time of those events to information sharing when we have a mass group, right? If we're trying to do some specific connecting, which can happen virtually depending on the outcomes, we break them out into smaller groups with different facilitators. So I might have 40 people in a WebEx or a Teams meeting to really just share information with them, to then go and break them down into like 10 small groups to actually do some small group work together, which is more efficient to have a facilitator for a group of 6 to really dive into something and then bring it back to a larger group that really does stimulate a little bit more conversation to meet the outcomes. And then you're going to some in-person thing later on, maybe it's 2 weeks later or something else. So that's what we've landed on when it comes to figuring out how we're going to use virtual time, because it saves on parking, it saves on things that you don't necessarily have to do in person, people traveling, childcare needs, work schedules. Sometimes we can get groups of people together we couldn't get together before, right? So those are the types of things to ask yourself now. Who are you trying to bring together, and can you do some of the work virtually and in small group virtually to meet the outcomes long term? I think I'll answer that question in a second. I think the other thing we've done and been trialing with virtual simulation has been things that happen in clinic. So in clinic, and nurses communicating with patients to triage. And so that has also been something that we found can be a real value using virtual technology to create those types of simulations for our staff in clinic environments and our ambulatory kind of hospital services. So that may be a new avenue to explore about how can you create sims for that environment using virtual technology. I think the other thing, you're concerned about how to make everyone keep participating. I think that's why we limit when I have a big group or I have one of my staff working with a big group. It's a one-way thing. We're giving them information. They've prepped for something. It's a one-way briefing, right? You're not going to get too much. You might get 1 or 2 people that respond to something. You really need to get them into the small groups we've found to get them to kind of open up and have some prompting questions. So that's kind of how they've participated, is once we move them into small virtual groups, and the technology we have allows us to do that. The other thing that the technology has is it has like little not games, but polls and things where you can ask people questions where they don't have to verbally respond, but they can electronically respond. And you can kind of use those things to keep the conversation going. So those are some of from the top of my head, things that we've done on the healthcare side to really leverage this technology.
Other hint that I would put in, Alicia, I could not echo more what Alicia said about using breakout rooms for small group sessions as a way to ensure that you keep engagement. The other thing that I think is really important is having people keep their cameras on. I think that cameras on really, really, really helps with engagement. And so a lot of times when I set things up, the problem is that the technology, depending on what you're trying to stream, you may not have the bandwidth that the people, when they have their cameras on, it actually changes the bandwidth for them to be able to stream the technology, but something that I would consider recommending.
Do you have the maximum time for the online simulation? Should not over 1 hour per each session.
Yeah, our triage simulation is about an hour, because you're actually going through an actual event, a call, and you need some briefing and debriefing time. So yes, that makes sense. Our virtual events aren't not more than 3 hours, but that's because there's a lot of breakout sessions and it's really like information and then kind of small group discussion. We learned pretty quickly that people can't do, like, if you have like new people coming in for like one big concept, they can't be on virtual more than 6 hours in a day, even if you break them up. So we had to really when we were forced to go virtual, shorten our time from like 8 or 10 hour days to, 4 to 6 hour days.
The other thing I would also say is that I think I've at least found, and I'm probably just really bad at this, is that you really have to make sure you plan in breaks when you do things virtually. When you're in person, it's very easy to read the room and say, okay, everyone needs a break, man, they're fried. You can't tell that in virtual. So I think one thing I would say is that if you're going to do longer virtual sessions, plan in breaks and tell people that you're going to have one. Because again, it doesn't prevent anyone from just getting up and leaving. That also helps with the engagement because they know when they're going to get a break. That's my opinion. I defer to the other educators on here.
And could you compare our system, like you have seen our tele simulation to many our hub, like in Chiang Mai to Khon Kaen? Can you compare the simulation online, our tele simulation? Which one is have more benefit? Because right now I think the emerging diseases situation is getting much better. Even though I run the CME lecture, we're still doing the hybrid because a lot of people have the habit, don't want to gathering in the big room like in the past. They prefer the online.
I think it goes back to like Alicia's point, which is if you don't need to travel, if you don't need to park, if you don't need to get a babysitter or whatever, then don't do it. We're really looking at quality of life, and how we're able to, during stressful times in our system, in our world, make some areas easier. And I think we probably won't ever go back to business as usual. Everyone must come into a room, sit around a table, and have a conversation. Like I think we will continue to see more online meetings and people being really innovative and creative to keep people engaged, and giving people breaks is a great point. I think today I've been in front of my computer for 8 hours straight, and I have had very few breaks. So like I did not do a good job today of blocking out some times to say, this is my lunchtime, this is my break time. It's easy to work more in some ways.
I think the other thing I would like to mention is we've mentioned a few times the idea of fidelity. And sometimes one of the purposes of fidelity is not only to help people engage with the learning, but it also helps to help with the facilitation or the transmission of knowledge, but it's also to help with them buying into why they're doing this. And so one thing to keep in mind, and I think every one of us who's a simulation educator on this call has suffered with this at one point, where the simulation or the activity we've designed, the learner says, this is completely irrelevant for what I want to do. Like this is not what I'm ever going to see. Why should I care? And so just always make sure that you are doing a good job of gathering feedback on the quality of your sessions and the relevance of your session, because because if you start making people or requiring simulations that people do not feel as a value add and you can't demonstrate as a value add, that's going to progressively degrade the engagement with your simulation center. So make sure more than ever that you are evaluating not only the quality of the simulation, but really then always asking, does this need to be in person? Can it be virtual? If it's going to be virtual, what do I do to make it better, especially when it comes to things around engagement and fidelity, which we know are new frontiers with this modality, except for telehealth simulations, which is obviously is what it is.
I think I will give the mic back to Emma. Her time.
Sorry, Emma.
Folks ask questions. I think the other option is we can totally send the PowerPoint off if we haven't already. So, but everything was super relevant to this slide, which is limitations of telehealth modality. So we've talked through most of these. The other piece that I'll just touch on is accessibility. So just like with all of our calls, sometimes we have, Wi-Fi that drops or people don't have the right technology. And so one of the things we're trying to be really careful of as we move to different campuses and outreach is that folks need to have the same type of technology or we need a backup. So sometimes we have learners in really rural places and we have to do instead of video to video. But in reality, if they were in that rural place and doing a telehealth visit with somebody, they probably still would be on the phone. So in terms of, simulation and replicating, one curriculum versus replicating what these, practitioners are actually going to be doing in real life, there's a balance there. And I think it can work well just to keep an eye on that especially for your learners. Next slide. There's a number of opportunities when we think about the telehealth modality. A lot of faculty development. We've talked about a few of these, distance learning, ability to diversify an SP pool. So not all of your SPs need to be in Bangkok where the center is. They could be in other places. And the program capacity is not driven by physical space, which is good, but also to Dr. Gold's point, you need to make sure that you're not building it out just to build it out. We like, ease of recording sessions for future training, whether that's for your internal purposes. So you did a sim, you recorded it, you're going to look at it, and the SimFAR are looking at it, or leadership is looking at it, or you're training new SPs, or even the job is so strange, like what is an SP or what is a sim tech? What does that look like? Next slide. Virtual dry runs, I'll touch very briefly on because Drew already talked about them basically. In fact, we talked about all of this, but rehearsals prior to the event. This is even for events that are happening in person. This is one of the things we're keeping. So events that are happening in person, we're still doing a virtual dry run for all the reasons that we talked about previously, saving parking and people and faculty time. The one exception is for, as we had just discussed, physical exams. Those we are doing we're doing dry runs in person, both for the standardized patients and so faculty know exactly what we're doing and so we can prep the space. That was one of the things that would we do it virtually? Yes, but if we don't have to, we won't. Next slide. Next slide. We did these. Great. Yes, thank you. Nope. Back. Yep, good. Recruitment and training. Thanks. One of the new pieces that we'll be doing as well that's coming up that we did last year is recruitment and training of standardized patients. So virtual info sessions, an initial online interview, and then the second callback will be in person so they can see the space and figure out, how to get here and kind of look at the day and what's happening. We like standardization of training and onboarding. That's not specific to SPs. That could be for any, colleagues that are, getting onboarded. It could be for new nurses. It could be for, and peer-to-peer observation and feedback. Again, not specific to SPs, but very helpful. We are also able to provide additional support for smaller sim centers in interviewing staff. This is SPs, but staff and standardized patients. So as you think about expanding the sim center to different, cities or partnerships or smaller sites in more rural places, perhaps, or whatever you're dreaming of right now. You can support that with the current admin you already have, with staff you already have, and you can help support those initiatives by keeping your training and recruitment online. We also like to look at virtual sessions because when we have standardized patients who are working or staff that is working and doing virtual work, we get to see their computer skills, we get to see their internet, we get to see kind of how they're interacting. And so it gives us kind of a holistic view of all the skill set that they'll need to be successful at their job. So we're excited about that. All right, I wanted to make sure we had a little bit more time for questions. So we can stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Emma.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it's time for our BDMS team. Yeah. Oh, okay. Dr. Jeff, you raise your hand.
No, that's because I hit the wrong damn button on my keyboard.
Okay.
I was giving Emma a thumbs up for a good job, and I screwed up.
Yeah. Yeah. And my question is right now, the situation in around the world about the COVID is almost back to normal, right? Do you still, yes, keep finger crossed. And do you think that is there any benefit to combine the online to the previous simulation training one? Because I think yeah.
What I would say is, Dr. Pazan, is I think if you ask 20 people, you'll get 20 different answers. What I would say is this, at least in the United States, post-COVID, the financial stresses on healthcare organizations are going to be worse than they've ever been. And our staff, especially clinical educators who also work in the clinical environment, are going to have less and less time. So we have to do their jobs. And there's going to be more and more people to train because of all the people we lost in healthcare during the pandemic. And so what we need to do is not think about whether we should be doing virtual or in person. We need to figure out the best way to use people and technology to allow for us to get the greatest economy of scale for delivering our educational activities. Maybe that's more virtual. Maybe that's using everybody on site, but having a distributed room network where you have multiple rooms going with one. There's multiple different ways. So I would phrase it a little differently, which is how can we maximize the reach and impact of our simulation activities by increasing the reach of our educators, increasing the access to our learners, and then using and adjusting our scenarios to make sure we meet the stuff that we really need to meet and cut out the waste. That's how I would look at it. Again, I defer to everyone else and my colleagues on the call. They probably have much better opinions than I do.
Just typing as Jeff was bringing up this point. I cannot stress this point enough. In general, from a strategic standpoint, what we're really looking at is what can we do that's maintaining our fiscal stewardship with the resources, not only in human capital but supplies and equipment and resources to meet the needs of the increased volume of the workforce that we need to take care of sicker patients in a fast-paced industry that's changed quite a bit, that we're just not keeping up with, and a backlog of care delivery. So we have a significant need to do more, improve access with less resources and time. So I think strategically, we're really looking at what are our strategies around that reality post-pandemic, and what tactics and outcomes are we trying to meet to get there, not just now, but this is going to be another 2 to 5 year phase. This isn't going away at any time soon. And we've got to think we're already behind. So how are we going to get there?
And it means even more so, Alicia, well said, by the way, that we need to bet more than ever. We have to be measuring the impact and outcomes of what we do so that if what we're doing is not achieving the goal, then either change it or get rid of it. Because again, so more than ever, you have to integrate, especially at a place like BDMS, have to integrate with the people who are collecting the critical outcomes data. And my dog agrees, as my dog was barking down there. So that's what I think is really important. And unfortunately, as places become short on personnel and time, assessment becomes actually the first thing that gets lost.
Yes, I agree with you. Right now, the situation in our hospital is the same because of we lack of the our personnel. But in the meantime, we have more patients. So every one who have the job have less time. And our SIMFAR is not work as a full time in our SIM center. Yeah, that's the thing that I have to fix it out because of if I plan to do something, it's about the budget. It's about the plan for this year and the renovation of our SIM center because our SIM center is 10 years already. Yeah, I talked to our administration team that probably maybe we have to improve the capacity and also the technology. So I think maybe today from your talk, your sharing, we learn a lot about the online and the benefit and some limitation. And I think maybe we have to talk in our SIM committee. What should we do for the next couple years? Okay, so we can improve in our SIM center. And I talked to my SIM committee last month. The next section, they have the new scenario. They will bring the new scenario to consult in the next meeting. Okay, yeah, maybe from our side to share what we prepare and what your comments. Okay.
Can you tell us, Dr. Paisal, make sure that we know what the topic or the general specialty of that scenario is, so that if we need a specific subject matter expert to join the call, that we have the opportunity to plan for that in advance?
Okay. Yeah, I will tell the team who prepared the new scenario. Okay.
Thank you. That would be fantastic.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for it.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.